Many of you have heard me talk a little bit about meekness over the last couple months podcasts or over the last several sermons, but I've really been moved by this concept that when Jesus said the meek shall inherit the earth, we have thought, and I say we, I really mean me. I don't know how you think of meekness, but I know how I did. Meek to me was just a guy that was really quiet and soft and kind of a pushover. So if the meek inherit the earth, I thought, well, that's just going to take God rewarding pushovers, because there's no way a meek guy's ever going to get it. You know, it's going to have to be God just gives it to people and goes, you guys, they beat the crap out of you when you were alive, so now here you go. Here, great is your reward. Thank you for being meek. Well, that's because we didn't understand meekness. I didn't. Meekness is not a guy that gets pushed over. Sometimes it is, but it's this first. It's really a military term, a man who has a sword but knows how to not use his sword, or really a man who in the midst of the opportunity to engage passes the engagement opportunity and keeps his sword sheathed. And that is way harder to do than pulling your sword, because if you've got one, why do you have one if you're not going to use it? Right? Why did you sharpen and bring a sword if it's not going to be used? It takes real, we would almost call it weakness, but I think it's the opposite. It takes an amazing amount of courage to be able to face what you're facing and not pull the sword and fight your way out of it. And that's why Jesus said the meek inherit the earth. It's why Jesus said meek people, or it's why Peter says give them the reason with meekness, because the meekness is the ability to respond and not pull the sword. And so it's the ability to respond to people but not attack them. That's not always been easy. It's not always easy for me to do. Respond but don't attack. I mean, attack's part of the response, right? Attack's the fun. They went after you, you got to go after them. I'm trying to learn meekness. Jesus was the ultimate example of meekness, because there's nobody that had more power than Jesus, and there's no one that used less of it against people. And that's amazing. I mean, he could have done whatever. He had the authority of heaven. And if we had the authority of heaven, if we had the ability to call down fire on our enemies, how many times would we have called down fire on our enemies? Probably the number is a lot lower to say how many times would we have not called down fire on our enemies. That's a smaller number. Because meekness is something we need when faced with questioning why we can have hope in the middle of a hopeless world. And then that last one, fear. Because if you think about the defense you should have, you don't think meekness and fear. But when you hear that meekness means keeping your sword sheathed, you go, okay, that's probably a pretty good idea. If you're going to defend yourself, you need to learn how to do it without attacking people. Because if you can't offend without attacking people, then you're useless in the world. Did you hear that? If you can't defend your cause without attacking people, you're useless in the world, because you're a weapon. And what are weapons for? Destruction. You go, defense. No, destruction. The only reason you call it defense is someone's out to destroy you. You want to destroy them back, and therefore the weapon exists to destroy. And so if you have to destroy to win, you're a weapon, and you're a danger in the situation, and you're a walking hurricane of chaos. And it's why Christ needs sanctified in our hearts as Lord, so that we have a clear and definable God on the throne in our lives. And it's not us, because if we're the clear and definable God on the throne of our lives, we are out to defend us at all costs. And we know Christ needs no defense. So if Christ is sanctified as the God of our heart, he doesn't need our defense. And therefore there is no reason to swing the sword, because we have a hard time picturing him swinging it. I have an easy time picturing me swinging it. I have a hard time picturing him swinging it. If you put him on the throne, and then the response is his response, sometimes before you click, sometimes before you open your mouth, sometimes before you write, sometimes before you respond, you would think, if Christ has truly been sanctified as King of my heart, is this the response he would give right now? And a lot of times, you're going to keep the sword right there.